Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, can we please take our seats so that we can commence with our program? May you kindly take your seats. Members of the head table, they are already in the waiting room. They are just waiting for us to settle so that they can enter the room. May you kindly take your seats, please. Those at the back, can you kindly find a seat? Please find your respective seats so that we can commence with our program. Distinguished delegates, may we please rise for the arrival of the high table. My apologies. I'm still waiting for the signal. I guess I was given a wrong signal because I'm not seeing. No, hold on, hold on. Hold on. Kindly take your seats for 10 minutes or so. My apologies. Something urgent just came up, so they are just discussing quickly. And then I will give you signal again. I apologize. distinguished delegates, may I now please request you, for real this time, to please rise for us to welcome the head table. Thank you. You may be seated. Thank you. Your Excellencies, the Honorable Justice, distinguished delegates, members of the diplomatic corps, and members of the media, a very good morning and welcome to the release of preliminary statements by the International Election Observation Missions to the 2026 general elections of the Republic of Zambia, which were held on the 13th of August, 2026. Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, my name is Annette Mtambanengwe, and I am from the Sadc Secretariat. It is with great honor and pleasure for me to be directing the proceedings for the release of the preliminary statements of the international observation missions. The following, we'll be hearing the statements from the following observation missions. We have the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission. We have the Joint African Union COMESA Election Observation Mission. We have the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region Election Observation Mission. We have the Electoral Commission's Forum Election Observation Mission in relation to the following the Zambia's general elections, as earlier stated, which was held in 13th of August, 2026. Please allow me, Your Excellencies and distinguished delegates, to take this opportunity to recognize the respective heads of mission, dignitaries, and invited guests in the House. I have the pleasure of introducing heads of mission as follows. We have Honorable Samuel B. Tembenu, Senior Counsel, who is the former Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of the Republic of Malawi, and he is the head of mission of the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission, SEOM. We have Ambassador Marie-Pierre Lloyd, member of the COMESA of the Panel of Elders, who is the deputy head of the Joint African Union COMESA Election Observation Mission. We have His Excellency, Dr. Mokwetsi Eric Masisi, former President of the Republic of Botswana and head of the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region Election Observation Mission. We have Honorable Justice Annabelle Mtalimanya, head of the Electoral Commission's Forum, who is the head and is also the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. We have Mr. Terry Rose, who is representing the Executive Secretary of SADC, and he is the Senior Officer for Politics and Diplomacy at the SADC Secretariat. Your Excellencies, heads of representatives of diplomatic missions accredited to the Republic of Zambia, representatives of the government of the Republic of Zambia, representatives of international organizations, distinguished members of the Troika of the Sadc on Organ Politics, Defense and Security Cooperation from the Republic of Malawi, the Kingdom of Eswatini, and the United Republic of Tanzania. Members of the Sadc Electoral Advisory Council, I recognize the chairpersons and members of the Electoral Commission of the Republic of Zambia, heads and representatives of the security and law enforcement agencies, leaders and representatives of political parties in the Republic of Zambia, as well as independent candidates, religious leaders, and members of the civil societies organizations, distinguished members of the international election observation missions that are present today. A very good morning to you and our media, of course. Thank you for your presence. The program for this occasion will be, of course, highlighted. If you look behind there, there are QR codes that have been put out. So if you can scan, you'll be able to access the preliminary program for this morning. We will commence our program as follows. We are going to have the address from His Honorable Samuel Tembenu, Senior Counsel, who is the former Minister of Justice and is the head of SIOM. And then we'll have the preliminary statement from the AU, the joint AU and COMESA election observation mission, which will be delivered by Ambassador Marie-Pierre Lloyd. And then we'll then move to His Excellency Dr. Mohwetsi Eric Masisi, former President of the Republic of Botswana, who is heading the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region Election Observation Mission. Lastly, our last preliminary statement will then come from the Electoral Commission's Forum of the Sadc countries, who is Honorable Justice Annabel Mtalibanya, who is the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Observation Mission. We will then transition into a Q&A, questions and answer, whereby we'll give the House and the media to pose questions to the high table. And that session will last for 20 to 30 minutes, and then we'll adjourn the meeting. With that being said, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished delegates and your excellencies, I would now like to call upon Honorable Samuel Tembenu, Senior Counsel, former Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of the Republic of Malawi, who is the head of mission of the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission, to come and deliver his preliminary statement. Honorable, you may wish to either address the House from your seat comfortably there, or if you would like, you can also come to the podium, whichever is comfortable for you.
Good morning, distinguished members of the Sadc Troika, Organ Troika, His Excellency Haile Mariam Desalegn Boshe, former Prime Minister of the Federal Republic, Democratic Republic of Ethiopia, and head of the Joint African Union, who is represented by who is represented here by Madam Mahapia. He hasn't been able to be with us this morning because of certain challenges. His Excellency Dr. Mohwetsi Eric Masisi, President of the Republic, former President of the Republic of Botswana, and head of the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region Election Observation Mission. Honorable Justice Annabel Mtalibanya, head of Electoral Commissioners Forum, Election Observation Mission, and chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission, MEC, distinguished heads and other international electoral observation missions present this morning, Mr. Terry Rose, representing the Executive Secretary of the Sadc, the chairperson and commissioners of the Electoral Commission of Zambia. They may not be here, but we recognize them. Your Excellencies, heads and representatives of the diplomatic missions accredited to the Republic of Zambia who are present this morning. Members of the Sadc Electoral Advisory Council, Sadc election observers, leaders and representatives of political parties, religious leaders and members of civil society, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the Southern Africa Development Community, as mandated by His Excellency, Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika, President of the Republic of Malawi, who is the chairperson of the Sadc organ on politics, defense, and security cooperation, it is my honor to welcome all of you to the release of the preliminary statement of the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission on the conduct of the general election held in the Republic of Zambia on the 13th of August. My statement is long. There will be instances where I'll just summarize it, but the written text is available. I was saying the statement is wrong, but there will be instances where I'll just summarize and the written text will be made available to all of you. The mission, like we said earlier on, comprised 106 personnel drawn from 10 Sadc member states and was deployed as short-term observer teams across all the provinces in the country. On election day, the mission observed a total of 277 polling stations, representing approximately 2% of the 13,529 polling stations established for these elections. The elections were contested by 14 presidential candidates and by 226 constituencies and 1,858 wards on a certified voters roll of 8,786,300 registered voters. As part of its mandate, the mission engaged a wide range of stakeholders, including the Electoral Commission of Zambia, the Attorney General, the Zambia Police Service, political parties across the governing and opposition benches, independent candidates, traditional leadership, faith-based organizations, civil society organizations, academia, the media, and the international observer missions. This preliminary report or statement covers the mission's observations of the pre-election period, voting day, as well as counting. The final report will include the mission's observations on the post-election processes, including results management and the announcement of results. The mission sets out below the legal framework governing these elections, followed by the aspects of the best practices which it observed. On the electoral law and electoral system, the 2026 general election was held to elect the president, members of the National Assembly, and councillors. They were governed principally by several pieces of legislation, including the Constitution of the Republic of Zambia, the Electoral Process Act, the Electoral Commission of Zambia Act, the Public Order Act, the Societies Act, the Anti-Corruption Act, the Cyber Security Act, the Cyber Crimes Act, and the Access to Information Act. The conduct of contestants is further regulated by the Electoral Code of the Code of Conduct made under the Electoral Processes Act. The mission notes that the legal framework was substantially amended during the current electoral process, and that those amendments had introduced a mixed member proportional representation, providing for seats intended to improve representation for women, the youth, and persons with disabilities. We also noted that there was a constitutional challenge to the amendments that were made. Questions arising from electoral reform and from party disputes were also referred to the courts. The mission was informed that judicial capacity had been strengthened and election petition rules put in place as well. Generally, the mission observed that the campaign rallies, road shows, public meetings, and door-to-door canvassing was conducted in a peaceful atmosphere in most areas of deployment where our observers were. Most stakeholders consulted across the governing as well as the opposition benches, the security services and academia as well as civil society, told the mission that the environment represented a marked improvement upon the 2021 elections. Preparedness of the Electoral Commission of Zambia. The mission observed that the commission completed its preparedness in good time and to a high standard. Polling staff were recruited, trained and briefed, as well as deployed across the country. Ballot papers and other materials were printed, delivered and verified, and accreditation of observers done. Transparency in the verification and custody of electoral materials. Wherever the mission directly observed the verification of ballot papers and ballot boxes, the exercise was conducted transparently and in the presence of agents of the contesting parties and of the media, with serial numbers verified and receipt signed for. However, in one province, the commission rescheduled the exercise by agreement with stakeholders so that ballots would be opened, verified, and transported to polling stations together with deployed staff on the same day for security reasons. The mission would like to commend that practice. Conflict management and machinery. The mission observed that the district conflict management committees established by the commission, with membership drawn from a range of political parties and state and non-state organizations, are functioning. There were disputes that were referred to this committee in places like Chipata, Luangwa, and Katete. Let me come now to our observations on election day. On election day, the mission observed activities at 277 polling stations across all the 10 provinces, and this represented 2% of the 13,529 polling stations. Of the polling stations that were observed, 216, being 78%, were in urban areas, and 61, being 22%, were in rural areas. At these polling stations, the mission observed the following. Number one, the atmosphere was calm and peaceful at 275 of the 277 stations. The conduct of the uniformed police was assessed as professional at 247 of the polling stations observed, and security personnel were visibly present outside 269 of them. The police presence was assessed as insufficient at 2 polling stations and as intimidating at 1. Opening of polling stations. 221 of 227 of the polling stations observed being opened at the prescribed time, representing 80% of our observation of the stations that we observed. Where opening was delayed, the reasons recorded were the pace of final preparations, the late arrival of materials, officials or agents, date stamps supplied without ink, and at one station, poor lighting. At 17 stations at which the mission observed opening, essential materials were present before opening. Irregularities and interruptions. Voting proceeded free of irregularity at 255 of the 277 stations observed, being 92%. Where irregularity was recorded, it concerned the positioning or construction of polling booths in a manner affecting the secrecy of the vote, the register not being displayed, and polling staff or officials not in uniform. Voting was interrupted at 2 polling stations on account of an official stamp without ink and an issue concerning ballot papers. Availability and display of voters' register. The voters' register was displayed at 201 of the 277 polling stations observed, being 73%. At the remainder of the stations, it was not displayed and was not therefore available for the convenience of the voters or for verification by party candidates. Campaign materials around the vicinity of voting. Campaign materials in the vicinity of polling stations. No campaign activity was observed within the vicinity at 276 of the 277 polling stations. At one polling station, a person was observed making party-affiliated hand signs a short distance away from the polling station. Accessibility and priority voting. 226 of the 227 polling stations observed, being 82%, were accessible to all voters, including persons with disabilities. Where a station was not accessible, the reasons recorded were the unleveled state of the ground, obstruction of the entrance by crowds, the location of a polling station upstairs, and late change from tents to rooms occasioned by the non-delivery of tents. Persons with disabilities, the elderly, expectant, and nursing mothers were observed in the queues at 138 polling stations and accorded priority at 125 of those. Assistance to voters. Assistance was provided to voters who requested it at 97 of the 277 polling stations. Sufficiency of electoral materials. Electoral materials were adequately available at 250 of the 277 polling stations observed. Where they were not, those mostly commonly wanting were polling booths, logbooks, envelopes, reconciliation forms, stamps, indelible ink, ballot boxes, aprons, and trays. Officials improvised in some of these places. Composition of polling staff. An average of 6 polling officials was present at each polling station observed, of whom 61% were women. An average of 3 citizen observers was also present, of whom 61% were also women. Agents of 13 political parties, together with agents of independent candidates, were recorded across most of the polling stations. Complaints received by presiding officers. No official complaint had been received at 261 of 277 polling stations observed. Where complaints were received, they concerned the absence of voters' names from the register, the tender of expired voters' cards, delay in opening, and polling officials not in uniform. Voters turned away. No voter was turned away at 247 of the 277 polling stations. Where voters were turned away, the reasons were recorded. Layout of polling stations and custody of ballot boxes. The polling station was laid out so as to permit the easy flow of voters at 276 of the 277 polling stations. Closing of the poll. The mission observed the closing of the poll at 17 polling stations, of which 12 closed at the prescribed hour of 18 hours. Where a queue remained, every voter in it was permitted to vote, and the queue was closed to further joiners within 15 minutes of the prescribed hour. Reconciliation of ballots and closing records. The presiding officer reconciled and used and spoiled ballots against ballots received at 14 of the 17 polling stations we observed. In the view of agents and observers, and the figures were announced to those at 13 of those stations. The serial numbers of the ballot box seals were recorded in the polling station journal at every station observed. The minutes of the closing were completed at 14, and the voters' register and other sensitive materials were packaged securely before counting at 10. At one station, counting commenced before reconciliation had been concluded and without announcement, although the party agents were present and raised no objection. Counting. The mission observed the count at 17 polling stations, at which it observed the closing of the poll. Counting commenced at an average of 19:09 hours. The polling station was rearranged to permit counting to be followed at every station observed. Party and candidate agents were permitted to remain throughout every station, and Sadc observers were granted access to every station. Police officers were present at all those 17 stations. Reconciliation and declaration of results. The number of ballot papers in the ballot box matched the number of used ballots previously announced at 12 of the 17 polling stations that we observed. Where the totals did not match, the discrepancy was in most cases attributed to a ballot paper having been placed in the wrong ballot box, to be resolved once all the ballot boxes had been opened for counting. The result of count form was completed at 13 stations, and agents signed and received a copy of the results at 13. Where they did not receive, the reason was recorded. The form was posted outside the polling station at 17 stations only, at 7 stations of those observed. Used, rejected, spoiled, and valid ballots were sealed in envelopes in the full view of appointment of commissioners of the Electoral Commission of Zambia. It must be said that commissioners of the Electoral Commission of Zambia are appointed according to the Electoral Commission Act and appointed by the President. However, some stakeholders, which the mission interfaced with, expressed discomfort with this arrangement on the ground that where a sitting president is also a contestant in a given election, he or she may be tempted to appoint commissioners who are compromised professionally or are not impartial. The mission makes no finding as to the conduct of the commission, which it observes throughout to be professional, and that the appointment of the commissioners complied with the prevailing legal framework. However, to address the concerns, the mission suggests to the relevant stakeholders to consider addressing the concerns through legislative reforms initiated in accordance with the laws of Zambia. communication of electoral procedures to the voters. The mission recorded in 3 provinces confusion as to the manner in which a ballot is validly marked. The Commission's position is that either a cross or a tick is acceptable, provided the intention of the voter is clear. The mission is satisfied that this position is correct. It observes that it did not reach the stakeholders, however. The mission separately recorded reports in 2 provinces of a change to the requirement that ballot papers bear a stamp or seal. Given the high rate of rejected ballots recorded in the 2021 elections, the mission considers that greater clarity as to marking of the ballot paper be made. Media environment. The mission noted that the media coverage for these elections were undertaken by both the public broadcaster as well as private houses. The mission noted that the opposition and independent candidates in 4 provinces reported that coverage favored the governing or ruling party. They claimed that this led to the opposition relying on private and community broadcasters, which required payment, and some stakeholders consulted put that coverage at between 60 and 70% in favor of the governing party, while assessing private coverage as balanced. Others reported that free airtime had been afforded to all contestants, including independents. The mission separately recorded from media practitioners and party representatives, civil society and international observer missions, a consistent report that recently enacted cyber-related legislation has produced a chilling effect upon journalists and citizens engaging in online expression. There were other concerns regarding use of public resources. The mission noted that there were complaints, especially from the opposition, that they were disadvantaged in that respect, in that the ruling party had access to public resources. Reported political violence and the response of law enforcement agencies. The mission directly observed 2 violations of the Electoral Code of Conduct during the campaign period, both in the same province and on consecutive days. In each of these instances, supporters of the governing party disrupted the sanctioned campaign activity of another contestant. No security personnel were present, and no injury or damage to property resulted. The mission additionally recorded but could not verify reports of intimidation, assault, abduction, and damage to property in 5 provinces, some involving reported physical injury. Inclusion and participation of women and persons with disabilities. The mission was unable to obtain a consistent figure for the quota reserved for women candidates, which was reported at widely varying levels. Teams recorded concern at the low number of women contesting, with only 1 woman contesting as a presidential candidate. On polling day, women constituted 61% of polling officers and 53% of party agents at the polling stations observed. Distribution of electoral materials and deployment of staff. On the eve of the poll, the mission teams observed independently and in 6 provinces that the distribution of electoral materials and deployment of polling staff were running late. The Commission explained that priority was accorded to most distant stations and that transport was limited, and that the clearance of certain polling officials had been completed later than planned. Secrecy of the ballot. The mission observed that at some polling stations, the national registration number of the voter was recorded against or upon the ballot paper issued to that voter. The mission makes no finding as to the purpose of that practice. It observes, however, that any procedure by which a ballot paper can be traced to an individual voter with the secrecy of the ballot, which is guaranteed by the Constitution and is a fundamental principle of the Sadc principles and guidelines governing democratic elections. With its observations and all these with the observations that we have made, the mission, in light of these observations, would like to make certain recommendations for the improvement of the electoral processes in the Republic of Zambia. I will not go into into a detailed account of those observations, recommendations, but I will just outline them. The first recommendation that the mission would like to make would be on legislation, that the government might consider promulgating a Political Parties Act so that it regulates how politics is conducted in this country. On the appointment of commissioners, the mission would also recommend a proper discussion regarding the appointment of the process of appointing commissioners, so that everybody, there's consultation that reflects the proper composition of the commission. Thirdly, timeliness of electoral reform, that any proposed amendments to the electoral legal framework be enacted and that challenges to that framework determined sufficiently in advance before an election, other than what happened this time around. The new system of representation. The mission notes that the mixed member representation system needs more explanation to the voter. Not many understand how it works. Media and freedom of expression. That the government might also consider reviewing the cyber-related legislation so that they are in line with the constitutional guarantees and regional obligations regarding freedom of expression and association. The other recommendation relates to campaign timetable and use of public resources. Then another one relates to response to electoral offenses, that the Zambia Police Service ensure that reports of electoral violence and intimidation are investigated and that outcomes are communicated to the complainants. Inclusion. The other recommendation relates to inclusion and participation, that the government and the Commission and political parties take further measures to increase the participation of marginalized populations like women, the youth, and persons living with disabilities. Regarding the electoral process itself, we've come up with another recommendation on closing procedures and reconciliation, that the Commission reinforce in the training of presiding officers the requirement that reconciliation of used ballot boxes, ballot papers, and unspoiled ones be completed and announced to those present before counting commences. Then the Commission might also wish to look at the secrecy of the ballot, that the Electoral Commission of Zambia discontinue any practice by which the national registration number of a voter is recorded against or upon the ballot paper issued to that voter, and that any ballot accounting control be designed so that no ballot paper can be traced or be identifiable to the voter who cast it. Ladies and gentlemen, excellencies, in conclusion, the mission recorded a number of matters, as already mentioned, which require attention before the next cycle of elections. Of particular concern was the uncertainty and anxiety that ensued after the Commission suspended the counting and announcement of results with effect from 14 August 2026, citing reports of violence affecting counting and results processes in some districts. However, this suspension was lifted. In accordance with the Before I get to the conclusion, let me also say that the mission was not in a position to observe the counting and collation of results during the period of suspension, and will address these processes, including this development in its final report. The mission at the moment urges all contestants, their supporters, and all stakeholders to remain calm, to refrain from any act of violence or interference with the electoral officials or materials, and to pursue any grievance through the legal remedies available. In accordance with the Sadc principles and guidelines governing democratic elections 2021, our final report will be released within 30 days of this preliminary statement. Ladies and gentlemen and excellencies, I thank you for your attention and for listening.
Thank you very much, Honorable Samuel Tembenu, a senior counsel who is serving as the head of mission for the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission to the Republic of Zambia. Before I call upon the joint AU COMESA Deputy Head of Mission, I would like to recognize the Secretary General of COMESA, Her Excellency, Madam Kapepe. I would also like to recognize the Executive Secretary for ICGRI, His Excellency Dr. Mubita, and the United Nations Resident Coordinator, Madam Mutali. My apology to have recognized you earlier on. Having said that, Your Excellencies, distinguished delegates, I would now like to call upon Ambassador Marie-Pierre Lloyd, member of the COMESA panel of the WISE, who is also the deputy head of the Joint African Union COMESA Election Observation Mission, to deliver her preliminary statement. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Thank you. Honorable Samuel Tembenu, former Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs of the Republic of Malawi and head of the mission of the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission. His Excellency Dr. Mokwetsi Masisi, former President of the Republic of Botswana and head of the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region Election Observation Mission. Honorable Justice Annabel Mtalimanja, head of the Electoral Commissions from ECF, Election Observation Mission, and chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. And now, if you please allow me, I'd like to stand on all the protocols already established. The African Union and the Common Market for Eastern and Southern Africa, short COMESA, deployed a joint election observation mission to observe the 13th August 2026 general elections of the Republic of Zambia. The mission comprised 93 short-term observers from 27 African countries, 52% of whom were women and 58% were youth. Since our arrival, the AU COMESA EOM has engaged with a broad range of Zambian stakeholders, including the Electoral Commission of Zambia, government officials, political parties, civil society organizations, faith-based outreach, citizen observer groups, development partners, the diplomatic community, and other relevant actors. The mission deployed 33 observer teams across 8 provinces of Zambia. The teams observed the final campaign period, opening of polling stations, voting, closing, and counting procedures across urban, peri-urban, and rural areas, which were said largely peaceful. However, the mission was concerned about the suspension of the counting, tabulation, and announcement of results due to alleged violence and growing tension. The mission appreciates the resumption and the continuation of this process now. Based on our observations and interactions, we present our preliminary findings, noting that the electoral process is still ongoing, particularly the counting of votes. The mission acknowledges the following following commendable practices. 1, the government's provision of full funding for the 2026 elections, demonstrating national ownership and commitment to the electoral process. The introduction of mixed member proportional representation as an affirmation measure intended to enhance the representation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities. The commitment by citizens to participate in the electoral process, demonstrated by high voter turnout from the early hours of election day, despite the cold weather and the long queues at some polling stations. The ECZ's efforts to disaggregate data on persons with disabilities on the voter register, according to the nature of their disability, as a step towards more targeted electoral inclusion. The provision of copies of the voters' register to candidate agents, enabling them to independently check and verify voters and enhancing transparency in the voter verification process. The establishment of advisory committee on election to address matters relating to election dispute. While Zambia has demonstrated important democratic gains, electoral stakeholders should, however, consider the following. The enactment of the Electoral Processes Act in May 2026, approximately 3 months before the elections, provided limited time for comprehensive civic and voter education on the new legal provisions. Stakeholders also raised concerns on the partial enforcement of the Public Order Act regarding restrictions on opposition rallies and public meetings. Women remained underrepresented as candidates, with a proportion of female National Assembly candidates declining from 21% in 2021 to 12.5% in 2026, despite the increase in parliamentary seats. The media environment remained active and diverse, but concerns were raised regarding the arrest and charging of journalists, the application of the Cybersecurity and Cybercrime Act, which stakeholders considered to have contributed to restrictions of freedom of expression and self-censorship. Polling stations generally open in an orderly manner, but only 66% of those visited opened on time, compared with 89% in the mission's observation of 2021. Delays were attributed to the late arrival of polling officials and of election materials. The mission also observed challenges relating to voter processing station capacity, including inadequate numbers of polling booths in relation to the number of voters, which contributed to congestion, prolonged queues, and delays in some locations. The mission therefore considers that the number of polling stations and booths be aligned with the number of registered voters per constituency. Based on these observations, the mission proposes the following initial recommendations: to ensure that constitutional and electoral reforms are undertaken through broad-based consultations, and that electoral legislation be enacted sufficiently in advance of elections to allow adequate implementation, stakeholder preparation, and civic and voter education. That we strengthen the legal and institutional framework for political participation by reviewing legislation affecting civic and political rights and enacting legislation regulating political parties and campaign financing. To strengthen the administration of polling by increasing the number of polling booths and polling stations in line with the number of registered voters to reduce delays and congestion. To adopt concrete measures to increase effective participation and representation of women, youth, and persons with disabilities, including through transparent and inclusive candidate selection processes and appropriate voluntary quotas and targeted support. To strengthen media regulation and professional standards to promote equitable access and balanced coverage of electoral contestants while safeguarding freedom of expression and an enabling environment for independent journalism. As the results management process remains ongoing, the AU COMESA mission urges all stakeholders to remain calm, exercise restraint, refrain from acts or statements that could heighten tensions, and to allow the ECZ to complete the counting, verification, and announcement of results in accordance with the law. The mission will remain engaged with the remaining electoral processes and present a comprehensive assessment in our final report. And I would like to advise that the fuller version of this preliminary statement is also available. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador, for that very short, concise statement from the Joint African Union and COMESA Election Observation Mission. I now extend an invitation to His Excellency, Dr. Mokgweetsi Eric Masisi, former President of the Republic of Botswana, who is also head of the International Conference on the Great Lakes Region, Election Observation Mission to the Republic of Zambia, to kindly deliver his preliminary statement. Your Excellency.
Thank you very much, moderator of this press conference. The head of the Sadc mission, the head of the AU COMESA mission, the head of the ECF, COMESA SG, UN, Sadc Secretariat, Troika, Your Excellencies, High Commissioners and Ambassadors, members of the media, distinguished ladies and gentlemen, a very good morning. I address you today as the head of the ICGLR, Electoral Observation Mission deployed across Zambia to observe the conduct of the national elections held on the 13th of August 2026. We have monitored polling and counting processes and sought to assess the extent to which elections were conducted within the parameters of the Zambian constitutional standards and international commitments, including those of our own in the ICGLR, RL. We met and engaged key players in the elections, including but not limited to His Excellency President Hichilema, Presidential Candidate Mr. Brian Mundubile, the UNDP representative, Citizen First, the Attorney General, IGP, various churches and church associations, women's groups, Electoral Commission of Zambia, and other political parties. A good perception and readiness for the election was arrived at from these engagements. These ranged from outright dismissal of the integrity of the elections to confidence in the elections. We communicated our desire to be helpful and to observe objectively these elections. Our mission was made up of close to 100 election observers from member states and was deployed throughout Zambia, we observed the opening, the counting, closing, verification, and counting of these votes. These observed processes on the main were viewed as transparent, to have been fair, legal, and peaceful. There were provisions made for the elderly, expectant mothers, and people with disabilities to vote without hindrance. The election officials, the signage, and facilitation of voters was generally orderly in most polling stations. Some observers noted that a number of election officials were not able to vote because their certificates were not delivered by the ECZ. Security was present and on the main conducted themselves in a professional manner. There was sufficient lighting and political parties were represented in most stations, while in others, some parties were not represented at all. The polling was generally peaceful in the observed stations. No campaigning was observed at and around the polling stations. A unique voter registration number was recorded on each ballot paper, which raised the possibility of tracing a vote to the actual voter following an audit or some mischief after the vote is concerning. It raises concerns about the actual secrecy of the ballot and its protection. Most polling stations observed were compliant with the provisions of the law as it affects the conduct of the poll on polling day. We noted a heightening of speculation, allegations, and accusations as the day of polling progressed. Following serious incidents as reported, the ECZ issued a statement informing of its decision to suspend counting and announcement of results. We've been closely monitoring recent developments, including this suspension and the counting on announcements of results. I begin by expressing our concern about this suspension and its potential effect on the credibility of the process and the confidence of voters, let alone anxiety that it raised. The right to have one's vote counted is a fundamental democratic right. Any interruption of counting may undermine that right and must be addressed transparently and urgently. The confirmation of the suspension was made public on the 14th, yesterday, August 2026. It was reported that suspension was as a result of incidents of violence and logistical breakdowns, including assaults on election officials. When we realized that tensions were rising, perhaps following the suspension of counting and the announcement of results by the ECZ, we convened immediately as heads of mission and immediately engaged in shuttle diplomacy by calling on the main opposition and the ruling party to de-escalate, to refrain from announcement of any results, to stop immediately inflammatory language, reassure us that they will continue respecting the rule of law, and to trust us as neutral observers whom they should engage 24/7 for us to midwife this important general election for democracy. To their credit, they both graciously agreed and further agreed to issue public statements immediately to communicate such pledges and report on the outcome of our meeting with them. Finally, we informed the ECZ of our engagement with the two main parties when we ourselves sought audience with the ECZ to seek explanation as to the reasons for the suspension. It is our intention to engage other participants in these elections to achieve the same. To this end, we have revised our departure schedules to take effect after the full conclusion of these important elections. Upon engagement with the Electoral Commission of Zambia, the ECZ, they provided clear explanations for the suspension. They also shared measures taken to secure ballots, timelines, and conditions required for resumption. ECZ further recommitted to the release of results within the mandated 72-hour period. As heads of missions, we were reassured by the explanation offered by the ECZ. I wish to underscore that a credible election is not solely the technical act of counting ballots, it is the public reassurances that every lawful vote will be respected and that procedures are followed transparently. Based on this understanding, the ICGLR mission remains committed to impartial observation. We will continue to monitor developments on the ground, verify information, and report our findings. We therefore renew our call for calm, for restraint, respect for the rule of law, and patience until the results are announced by the lawful authority, being the ECZ. A detailed and very full statement of the 2026 Zambia elections will be issued following the conclusion of these elections. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, for the statement from ICGLR. The final statement will be delivered by Honorable Justice Annabel Talimaja, who is the head of the Electoral Commission's Forum of Southern African Countries Election Observation Mission, and she also serves as the chairperson of the Malawi Electoral Commission. Honorable Justice, you have the floor.
Thank you, Moderator. Honorable Samuel Tembenu, Senior Counsel, former Minister of Justice and Constitutional Affairs for the Republic of Malawi and the Head of Mission for SIOM. Ambassador Marie-Pierre Lloyd, Deputy Head of Mission for the Africa Union COMESA Election Observation Mission. Your Excellency, Dr. Masisi, former President of the Republic of Botswana and Head of Mission for ICGLR, and indeed all invited guests present this afternoon. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. I know I stand between you and lunch. I'll make it brief as possible. The Electoral Commission's Forum of Southern African Sadc community is an independent regional association of election management bodies established in July 1998 to promote professional, credible, and democratic electoral governance within the region. The forum provides a platform through which electoral management bodies cooperate, share experiences and best practices, and contribute to the strengthening of electoral democracy across the region. In this regard, the forum deploys election observation missions that have a mandate to assess electoral processes and to provide peer-to-peer support to its member commissions during elections in the region. The Electoral Commission of Zambia is a member of ECF Sadc. At the invitation of the ECZ, the ECF Sadc deployed to observe these elections. The mission has 40 observers drawn from 11 member election management bodies. During the mission, we engaged with several stakeholders, including political parties, CSOs, FPOs, the media, and the academia, among others. For the main mission, the mission deployed teams to 5 of the 10 provinces, that is Lusaka, Southern, Central, Eastern, and Copperbelt provinces. Prior to the main mission, we also had a pre-assessment mission in May to assess the pre-election environment and in particular to assess the preparedness of the ECZ to conduct the general election. Today, this is an initial statement from the mission as the results tallying process is still ongoing and also the electoral environment keeps evolving. The mission will issue a more comprehensive and detailed preliminary statement of its findings and assessment at a later stage. The mission notes that on 14th August, the ECZ issued a press release to suspend the counting and tallying of election results throughout the country for 24 hours. According to the press release, this was due to a security situation, continued threats of violence targeted at post staff, and in some instances, theft of marked ballot papers. According to the press release, this was on the premise of Section 67 of the Electoral Process Act of 2016. The suspension, we noted with appreciation, was later lifted at the close of business yesterday. Whilst the mission continues to observe the immediate post-election environment in liaison with other international observer missions, the mission presently makes the following general observation: that the election day procedures generally proceeded well, with no reports of widespread intimidation or significant disruptions to polling. The mission, however, observed that some operational and logistical challenges, including delays in delivery and inadequacy of materials, were observed throughout the day. These will be elaborated fully in our preliminary statement to be issued later as indicated. The preliminary statement will also cover our assessment of the pre-election environment, the legal framework governing the electoral processes, the preparedness of the ECZ and the political environment, as well as the conflict management mechanisms put in place by the ECZ to manage disputes that may arise, as well as our recommendations generally. The ECF Sadc, being a peer-to-peer mission to ECZ, is playing a critical role in supporting our member commission at this critical moment as they discharge their mandate. And this has informed and necessitated a change of approach to the mission's deployment in Zambia. Whilst we were originally scheduled to close on 16th, which is tomorrow, given the current circumstances, the leadership of the mission will remain in country until at least the 19th of August. During this period, the mission will continue to observe the results tallying process and to provide peer support to the ECZ and work together with other international observer missions here present that have the mandate to undertake preventive diplomacy. The mission will also continue to assess the immediate post-election environment and will issue a comprehensive statement in due course. As I close, the mission is calling on all electoral stakeholders to exercise restraint and to address all grievances that they may have through the legally established mechanisms as the ECZ continues to announce the election results. The mission further calls on the ECZ to provide regular and detailed updates to the public during this period. The mission is reassured by the presence of regional actors in the country to contribute to confidence building. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Honorable Justice, for the delivering of the statement of the ECF. Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, we have received all the preliminary statements that we're supposed to receive this morning from the International Elections Observation Mission to the Republic of Zambia's general election in accordance with our program. I extend our deepest gratitude to their Excellencies, the Honorable Justice, for the delivery of the preliminary statements on the findings of the respective elections observation missions. Distinguished delegates, Your Excellencies, the preliminary statements, as per usual, will be distributed by the respective missions on their online platforms. So after this session, you'll be able to access them respectively. We now take this opportunity to address questions from the media in the House. We will be having a roving mic. I'll be assisted by my fellow Sadc Secretariat colleagues. If you can please assist with the roving mic as we transition into the Q&A. I kindly request that the questions be precise, and please let's keep the questions very short. To pose a question, if you are interested in posing your question, kindly introduce yourself by your full name, your organization of which you represent, and then you can go ahead and pose your questions. Do we have the mics? Can I have an indication if we have those that want to pose questions, either from the media or from the House? You are all welcome. The head table to then respond to those questions or concerns that will arise from the House. No questions? No comments? So I'm assuming that the preliminary statements were, oh, I can see, all right. Can we have the roving mics, please? There at the back, we have two. Kindly introduce yourself, the institution that you are representing, and pose your question.
Good afternoon, Your Excellencies. My name is Benedict Mlenga. I am the president of Anti-Political Violence Association of Zambia. We are peace ambassadors. I just want to thank you for observing elections, and my appeal is that let peace prevail in the land of Zambia, as we are a Christian nation. I thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam. Do we have, I'm seeing a hand in the middle. Can we please get a roving mic?
Thank you very much. My name is Chishala Kateka, president of the New Heritage Party. I hope it's acceptable that I'm not media. I'm also a member of the Tonse Pamozi Woza Alliance. I would like to thank the panel for the presentations. I just wanted to make some observations. The first one was regarding the tick or the cross, whether it's acceptable. I think that if we noted on the ballot papers, it actually said a cross, not a tick. So I think that if rules are going to be changed, they should be changed well before and not on the, like the last day. We also observed that some of this may not sound really serious, but we noted that after the suspension of the counting of the ballots, that after, before the Gen 20s, when you looked at the results of the opposition, apart from Brian Mondwele, everybody was getting 0, 1, 0, 0, 0. And then afterwards, suddenly, they were getting 50s and 100s, 300. That may not seem really important. However, trends, we shouldn't disregard trends. And we saw that the trend changed afterwards. Of course, we are going to compare the original Gen 20s to what we are now receiving. We feel that that suspension really puts a damper on everything, because we now begin to question what happened to the ballot boxes. Were they safe? Were things put in place, to secure those things? Why were the agents asked to leave? So those are serious causes of concern for us. And the final observation is, why are we using the army when we have civic issues at play? This is not the Zambia we have known, and we are really concerned about the change of things that we are observing. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madam. Do we have further comments, observations, questions? I don't see, oh, yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is Innocent Nube. I'm from Queen Mary University of London. I just want to ask one question. President Masisi spoke about the shuttle diplomacy that occurred yesterday. Just want to get a sense whether this occurred before or after the announcement of the suspension of the count by the ECZ, and also to the Sadc mission. I just want to find out whether during that process, has this issue probably been referred to the ministerial committee of the organ? And lastly, I also heard that the missions have adjusted their end dates, but the ECZ has committed to stick to the calendar of releasing the results within 72 hours. I just want to get clarity about why they would extend, since the ECZ has still confirmed that they'll still stick to the deadline. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. We have a question there at the back.
Very good afternoon.
Yes, sir, please go ahead, pose your question, your observation, or any concern that you have.
Challenge with the Hello, yeah, okay, thank you very much. My name's Chanda Chinukwe, Secretary General for the New Heritage Party. Firstly, my gratitude to all of you at the high table for your efforts. However, I want to make just one appeal. Historically, we have had the observer missions, you've done your reports, and at the end of the day, it's like it's just a slap on the wrist. I would like to recommend or request that can we seriously look at sanctions which can force erring parties to change for the better? Because if we are just going to do a report which they will file, of what use is it? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I will now give to the high table to respond to the comments, the questions posed, or the observations that were made. Your Excellencies, Head of Missions, you have the floor. Respond.
Good afternoon once again. Thank you so much for the observations and the questions. We will all be responsible here to give the answers. Let me first acknowledge the observation by Madam Bernadette Mulenga about the peace that must prevail in Zambia. The commitment of all the observer missions that have come to Zambia is to contribute to the tranquility and peace of Zambia. You have heard most of the mission heads saying that they have decided to extend their stay in Zambia so that they are able to see the process through to the end. And it is our wish that when we leave this country, we should leave it in peace and tranquility. We share in that wish and commitment. I will take the issue on the tick or cross. We have observed in our report or statement that the main issue should be how the voter has expressed his intention. In other countries, it's not about a tick or a cross only. They even use a thumbprint. You do that within the box that is given. So, because of the confusion that came about, that's why we are making a recommendation that this matter needs to be resolved before the next cycle of election starts, so that the voter is properly guided on how to express their intention as to who they want to vote for. We understand that the law in Zambia prescribes for the cross and not the tick. But that's a matter now for the Zambia Electoral Commission to look at, so that it explains to the electorate on how best to do this, to express their intention. There was an issue on shadow diplomacy. I will answer part of that question. The other part, I will leave it to His Excellency President Masisi, who is with me here. What happened is that yesterday, in this very room, we had a meeting with both the opposition as well as the government representatives, soon after we heard about the suspension. I would want to answer the part that you said whether the organ Sadc knows about it. Yes, everything that is happening here, we are representatives of the organ, and they are fully aware of the goings on at the moment. Let me ask President Masisi to explain more about our interaction with both the opposition and the government, the ruling party, yesterday, as well as our interaction with the ECZ regarding the issue of shadow diplomacy. Excellency.
Thank you very much. Let me add my voice to thanking the President of the Anti-Violence Committee or Association of Zambia, Madam Benedict Mlenga. And further, let me state that we are observers. We do not make judgments on the legality or otherwise of conduct. That is a matter for those best placed to so do. As to the shuttle diplomacy, I can confirm that a number of us in our missions engaged in quiet shuttle diplomacy even prior to the suspension, as a matter of attempting to prevent in advance any onset of attempts to unsettle the processes or peace. But certainly following the suspension and the heightening of anxiety, accusations, mischief, misinformation, and other narratives, particularly through social media, we reached out to the two main parties, the ruling party, and sought audience immediately with them. We reached out to the Tonze Alliance leadership and sought audience with them. And I must commend them because they were able to be with us within 30 minutes or less of us calling them. It's very useful to do that because we rely on them to exercise leadership among their supporters and within the leadership to really quell the heightening of tensions, which was evident. We also sought them to renew their faith and trust in us to play the role that we've come here to play, to be a conduit between them and any they complain about or allege wrongdoing from. And then we also sought audience, and again I want to thank them for their graciousness. The Electoral Commission of Zambia, full steam to seek clarification and communicate that which we have done, including the extraction of pledges by the two parties that we initially met to immediately issue statements to de-escalate and report to the supporters and members that they had met us, and we pledged to them to play the role of an intermediary. And indeed, we got explanation from the Electoral Commission of Zambia, and by that time, when we met them, they had also already issued a statement to lift the suspension and a commitment that they would be within the 72 hours of release of results. Now, clearly, acting out of due responsibility, we as missions discussed and resolved to extend our stay for those who had intended to leave prior to the date announced for the declaration of results, specifically to continue to play this role, because the election is not complete until it's complete. And that's when you all go back to your work, your jobs, your homes, and you accept the outcome. And we too go home knowing that Zambia is the Zambia we know. It does not guarantee that even on the dates that we said we would leave, you will have settled everything. So even though we've postponed, it's not final. You might see us here a little longer, or even see others. And this we've communicated to all parties, that we remain convinced that we will be around here and we will seek assistance if need be. The SG, Mr. Chanda, I think it was, Chimulue, of the New Heritage Party. Perhaps I should pass that to yourself.
No, take it.
You want to take?
Thank you, Your Excellency, and thank you, SG, New Heritage Party, for the question. Thank you very much for the appeal for sanctions for airing parties, if I was to quote you. Just to indicate that the mandate of observer missions would not extend to imposing sanctions, as it were, would not have that power. That said, if you follow all observer mission reports, they would have recommendations to the nation holding elections, and the recommendations would go to different stakeholders in terms of their mandates and their scopes. And if you also follow most observer mission reports and what would ensue in a country later on, you would find that there will be legal reforms, administrative reforms, or just certain practices that may be introduced. Most of those, if you follow through, they would come from recommendations that would follow from observer mission reports. And also in the structure of observer missions, you would start from the recommendations that you would have made from the previous general election, just to see whether those recommendations have been put in place, and even to inquire why those recommendations would not have been put in place. So that is the scheme around which the observer missions would operate, and that is the expected response from the country that is being observed, that they will not just get the report and file it, but they would put the recommendations into place. If you look at, for instance, for Zambia, and you see the reforms that have been made, I'm sure you'll be able to follow through that some reforms and that have been put in place are coming from observer mission reports from the 2021 general election and even before. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just to add on to what the chairperson of ECF has said, when we come here, we are just observers, like she said. It is from our recommendations that the governments would make the necessary amendments to their electoral laws. But in as far as Sadc is concerned, probably, I think, let me ask a member of the Troika so that they shed more light on how these things work. It's actually a secretariat.
Thank you very much, Head of Mission. Indeed, just to reiterate that our structure as Sadc for the observations constitutes also the 3 members of the organ Troika. So that is just to buttress the idea that, the understanding rather, that as we speak, there is a briefing that goes on continuously to each of the Troika members. As it pertains to the actual sanctioning, as informed by our heads of mission, the CIOM has that component where it does work on conflict prevention. This strategy has been very eloquently presented through our heads of mission, and we are continuing this process beyond election polling day with the different stakeholders. As this happens, we brief our ministerial committees and our respective chairs, incoming, current, and outgoing of the organ. And it is based on what happens as we continue this observation that any recommendation required will then be assessed, and then that consideration presented to the leadership for any further action. However, we rest assured with the confidence that the ongoing endeavors have reached the relevant ears, parties, our people of Zambia, and that we will progress accordingly in the anticipated space for a peaceful conclusion of these processes. Thank you.
Before the next questions, I think let me ask Ambassador Lloyd here to respond to one of the issues regarding violence.
Thank you, Chair. Regarding, I think it was Ms. Bernadette Mulenga, anti-violence. I think if you recall, listening to all the statements here, we have all said we urge all stakeholders to refrain from violence or any activities that may instigate violence. Our observation throughout all the meetings we've had, this is one thing we've urged. Political parties, everyone we've met, is being like, please let it be a peaceful election. So we share your concern. That's part of our mandate to ensure that it's a thing, though we are, as we said, observers. We make recommendations. So we observe, we consult, we make recommendations. Regarding the tick or the cross, this is one thing has been said. As you said, the form says the cross, and then the tick. And I think one of the recommendations we can make is that this needs to be looked into, because now, in the interest of inclusion, we're having even people with disabilities, including the blind and the vision impaired, who will also be voting. So provisions will have to be made, or we're recommending provisions be made so that we get all these other groups to be able to exercise their right to vote.
Thank you very much, heads of missions. Can I have an indication if we have further questions, comments from the House? Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Shalakateka again. Thank you for mentioning that you met our leaders yesterday. When they left, they went to, and I'm talking about Brian Munduvile and his team that met you yesterday. When they left, they went to a place and they were attacked. And a number of them were, I don't know whether to call it arrested or abducted, and we are still missing some of the leaders. We don't know where they are. I know you are an observer mission, you can't do anything about it, but it's an observation. We've been looking for people like Trevor Mwamba. We have no idea where he is. These things should not be happening. So we just wanted to bring that to your attention in case you were not aware. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Heads of mission, would you like to comment on that?
Thank you so much for the observation. We would like to assure you that apart from the observation that we're doing, we are fully aware of whatever is going on and the engagements that are taking place with the relevant authorities continue to take place so that we understand exactly what's going on. Because at a time like this one, there are so many things that go around. Then we need to really have proper information as an observer mission. But be assured that we are doing everything that we can in order to help that the process remains a credible process. President Masisi is very active in the engagement with all the stakeholders. And that's not surprising at all because of the position that he has had before as a president of the country. He's able to reach out to many of the players and talk to them about this. He was here yesterday when we spoke to the rest of the people we met. President, excellent, you may wish to add on to what we're doing regarding this.
Let me say without suggesting anything beyond which is alleged, we are alive to allegations that are serious, and trust us, we will take them up. We will not allow anything to go unchallenged or unresolved. And it's our responsibility to make sure that the environment in which we conduct elections to the very end remains one that is in accord with our norms. And so, having heard that, we are continuing to investigate on our own, and we will ask everybody, yet again, to be restrained. We are not certain who the shooters were, if they were shooters. We are not certain where it took place. We have made attempts to call all the leaders we met in the alliance. We spoke to only one who had promised us that he's going to drive to a particular safe house, as he called it, and he's going to get back to us. But we will keep you informed also. So rest assured, there's no way we can ignore anything that is out of the ordinary. And we will raise it with everybody without fear or favor. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to have the last round of questions, comments, observations. I see two hands. Can we bring a mic?
Thank you very
Eric?
much.
Okay, three. All right. Thank you.
Please introduce yourself and the organization you represent, and then pose your question or your observation or concern. Thank you.
My name is Professor Nkanduluo. I'm also coming from the Tonse Pamoze Alliance. I just want to ask, as you insist as an observer mission, whether the composition of the observer mission do have researchers during the time that you are observing what is going on here in Zambia. And why do I say this? Anecdotal evidence that is reaching a lot of us show that this violence is not general. This is a one-sided violence. And if there are researchers in your team, before you met the parties, they would have been able to say the perpetrators of violence are this section of teams. Because then when you do the diplomatic engagement, you'll be able to be candid enough to tell them to stop. There's no way an opposition party can walk in a polling station and run away with ballot paper, even burn them. So I want to know whether you do have researchers in the team so that they can do more investigations, so that when you're going to advise, it's advised from a position of evidence. Otherwise, what is going on in Zambia for me is unprecedented. It has never happened, and we can only proceed further. Even your further engagement and delay of your departure will be more meaningful if we are able to address the problems head on.
Thank you. Can we have the mic there? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Like I said, my name is Innocent Pasani Ngube. I'm Director of the Africa Election Study at the Queen Mary University of London. Two things, one comment and then a question. I'm excited as an African to see regional organizations collaborating, because instead of Sadc doing their thing and then the other organizations doing their thing, coming together is good. So my question stems from there. I just want to get a sense of a technical issue about your deployment mechanism when you deploy observers in the field. Do you collaborate in this deployment to ensure that you have wider coverage of the country, or each mission does the deployment on its own? For example, I was in the Copper Belt myself. I saw some, but I didn't see others as well. So I just want to get that sense of your deployment strategy as missions. Thank you.
Thank you. Can we have the last question? There was a hand that side on the left.
Thank you very much. Uyapon Dadi from Botswana. My question is directed to Ramasisi. I must commend you for seemingly taking the lead in engaging all the relevant key players. What I want to establish is, have you been able to extract commitment to accept the outcome of the results from all the key players? The Masisi way, if the ruling party is to lose. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I would now give the high table to please respond to the comments and the questions that were posed. The composition of the missions, do we have researchers, deployment mechanisms, do we collaborate as missions when we deploy our observers, and have you been able to extract any commitments from the engagements that we had yesterday? It's over to you, heads of missions.
Let me respond to the first question by Professor Nkanduluo. Do we have researchers in our missions? Probably let's explain and understand the nature of our mission. We come here as observers. we do not come here to do an investigation, but through our eyes and ears, especially our eyes, we observe what is happening. The missions are structured in such a way that, let me talk about the Sadc mission. We have a group that is assigned to be monitoring or to be looking at what the press in Zambia is saying. That is a special group. Then we have another group that receives reports from the fields, from what our observers are observing. Beyond that, it's not our mandate to begin an investigation as to what is happening on the ground. But what we observe finds itself in our reports. And as we said, those reports are shared with the nation, and at the higher level, they can discuss on how they should be implemented. Deployment mechanism. Each mission has its own deployment strategy. I do not Yeah. So ours, we had a team of observers. I said earlier on that we had about 106 that were sent out, and we were represented in each of the provinces in Zambia. They send reports to us on what they have observed. But I can't answer that question for IGLR, IGCLR, or the AU Commerce Summit Observer Mission. So I would defer how they do it to them so that they give us correct information on how they deploy their missions. The other question was sort of personal to Hoda, President Masisi. I'm tempted to answer it, but I think you answer it yourself.
Thank you. Regarding the deployment of observers, if I may say, until recently, the AU used to have a team and COMESA team, and we now have a joint mission. And with that joint mission, we can coordinate. But deployment on the ground is similar to, we have our observers, they go out and they send their reports. We've actually had a debriefing, all of them, they come in and because now they have little tablets they fill in and this information is being sent. And then we have a debriefing where they again highlight the main challenges and and this is what we put in this, what we call our report. It's not just from there. On top of that, we also, as we say, we interact with various stakeholders. And we have concerns have been expressed in the meetings we've had. And we note the concerns. Not going to go and do research true or not true, but we note there's been concerns regarding this. And of course, if the concerns coming from various sources, you think, okay, deeper. But this is our role. Observe, listen, consult, and then you put together a report highlighting. And as I say, this morning when we were debriefing, I said, thank you very much, your observers. Not only did they come out with the challenges or the positive step, they also included recommendations from their side as to what they would recommend. And the recommendations included the Electoral Commission, but also in terms of the AU, in terms of, different, what could work best. And that is the whole purpose of the mission, is so that we can learn from lessons and make things better for Zambia, but also for Africa in general. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor, for that question. Not fundamentally different from the ECF in terms of the methodology, but also just to add one point that the mission size and reach would also have dependent on the budgetary considerations available to the, if we talk about the ECF, to be also in terms of the budgetary considerations. Over and above that, also just to indicate that I believe there's a coordination group for all the missions where the coordinators are sharing notes and such other information. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You please.
Thank you very much. Just to add on the joint mission, this was motivated, of course, by the fact that all the COMESA member states are also African Union member states, and they are monitoring, or sorry, observing the election of a member state of both. It's prudent that instead of having that duplication, we have a joint mission which looks at joint training, joint deployment, therefore rationalizing use of resource and making sure we have wider reach than if we're doing it individually. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof. You asked or stated that the violence was one-sided, and if we had established that in our engagement with the parties, we established so many things in our engagement with the parties, one of which was that very allegation, as we want to see it, that the violence was one-sided. But we also had counter responses to those, because we did put it to the others to find out if that was so. So the contestation is such that many would say one thing or the other. Our take on it was to plead that all parties be respectful of the law, and the caution that we would hold them accountable. We would hold everybody accountable. This was started even from our engagement with His Excellency, and we reminded that we hold them very high in terms of responsibility for these elections. And so, yes, we were informed in advance that the violence, even prior to the elections, was one-sided. We sought clarity. It was denied by those who are accused. We even sought confirmation or clarity from the police, civil society, everybody. But we still made it known that these allegations are very much alive. In terms of the collaboration on deployment, yes, we do collaborate, as was said by my colleagues, but as with ICGLR, we also do have a method. And part of that method is informed by the pre-election assessment, where we prioritize those areas that ought to be prioritized, while being mindful of the necessity for representativity, so that when we make our views known, they are not unrepresentative of Zambia or these elections. My countryman, he wants to put me on the spot. You know, the Masisi way is not for everybody. In case you don't know, the Masisi way is where you famously concede before the counting is over. But you know, circumstances are different and perceptions are different. If it were so, I don't think we'd be engaged in shuttle diplomacy. But be as it may, yes, I did extract from every party we met, from the president to civil society, of their commitment to the rule of law, their commitment to accepting a loss. And even the ruling party representatives we met, aside the president, they reaffirmed even yesterday when we met them again, that if they were to lose the election, they would concede and accept. Thank you.
Thank you very much, heads of missions. We have now reached the end of our program, and I extend my gratitude to our esteemed speakers, Your Excellencies, the Honorable Justice, and distinguished guests, and members of the press for participating in this occasion. I also express my appreciation, like I said, to the diplomatic corps that have been invited and other international observer missions that are also present here. That being said, on behalf of the head of mission of the Sadc Electoral Observation Mission, I would like to thank you once again for attending. At this juncture, Your Excellencies, seated at the high table, may I kindly request your presence at the forefront of the table, of the high table, so that we can take a group photo before we dismantle the gathering here. The occasion has concluded, and I express my gratitude again for your participation. Thank you very much. Muito obrigada. Merci beaucoup. Asante sana.